Now, the Oxford Dictionary has just made post-truth its word of the year. Next year's favourite, post-apocalypse. But here this week, we've embraced the concept of hygge, the Danish word for enjoying life's simple pleasures. Michael looks far less frightening in the candlelight, and at his best with no light at all. We're going to sit around the fireplace, have a chill jam sesh, reminisce about the good old days when Liz thought she could be leader of the Labour Party. So break out the kale salad, leave the children at the pub, call the voters bigots, as Jon Ronson puts empathy in our spotlight. Emotions ran high in Westminster this week.
You're in a very emotional condition.
But was empathy in short supply? Tory MP Richard Bacon seems to think so, calling on Theresa May to show some love to blokes like him.
What message of reassurance does the Prime Minister have for fat, middle-aged white men who may feel that we have been left behind?
If the Tory backbencher's feeling dejected, he should put himself in Hillary Clinton's shoes.
There have been a few times this past week when all I wanted to do was just to curl up with a good book or our dogs and never leave the house again.
How about some compassion for those celebs in the jungle?
More spiders.
No? Schadenfreude it is then.
The idea of a bunch of Z-listers getting killed by spiders? Excellent television.
But Piers wasn't the only newsman to experience a failure of empathy this week.
They make people like you, or me, stand up to deliver the news. Why? What's the point? Why?
Well, if you sit for too long, you get piles. That's one reason.
Speak for yourself.
Jon Ronson knows empathy when he sees it.
I was a little surprised at how dreamy Michael Gove was.
So, what are its political costs and benefits? And Jon Ronson joins us now. Welcome to the programme.
Hello.
Is empathy a strength or a weakness in politicians?
Oh, I think empathy is a strength in everything. I mean, certainly as I get older and, you accumulate more and more baggage and you feel the sort of sadnesses of life. And I think it's really hard to not feel empathetic. I mean, for me, a kind of radical empathy is the right way to go. Yeah, in journalism.
You think Michael used to be reputed for being quite cold-hearted?
I was thinking about you, Michael. I have a sort of vague memory of you being fearsome and aloof and standoffish. When you look back on your days of power, do you think that you weren't empathetic enough? Or maybe you displayed a kind of selective empathy, which is, in its way just as bad.
I think I was empathetic. I just didn't appear so.
Or show it?
Why?
Well, I would say appear so. Because when you're a politician, you're always on the defensive. The only time people see you is when you're being interviewed, when you're facing a very hostile interviewer, and you kind of pull back like that. And
you put a little wall around yourself.
And the people who manage to look empathetic under that sort of pressure are very few and far between. And they tend to rise to the top. I mean, someone like Blair or David Cameron, for that matter, who can still look empathetic under that sort of pressure is a rare beast.
Yeah. I mean, I've found, what I've noticed the last couple of years is that everybody from all sides of the political spectrum have started to display this kind of selective empathy that then manifests itself in a kind of aggressive authoritarianism. And retreating to your corners and hunkering down and refusing to look at the other side in an empathetic light kind of polluted the waters, I think. And I think each side did it. And then
some of the media has gone that way.
Oh my God.
Social media.
Oh, yeah. Like social media is like the school bully, and the mainstream media is like the nerdy kids sucking up to the school bully. And I feel like we all kind of polluted the waters, and then Trump has emerged from them like a kind of mutant fish.
I think what's happened is...
Hold on, I wanted to bring Liz in if I can.
did you? Well, you did that.
Yes, thank you.
Go on. No, go on.
I mean, Liz, you're, I think, a very empathetic character, and much good did it do you?
It didn't.
So in politics, is empathy considered kind of a weakness?
I don't know whether it is different with women, that it can look weaker. I think another thing is when you I certainly find this in the constituency. If you're dealing with people over very upsetting cases and you yourself get upset, actually sometimes that helps, but sometimes they want you to take charge and sort it out, and so you're struggling to show how you feel, but you've also got this role to play. And I always find this the hardest thing in politics, is being yourself but also trying to provide some leadership. And of course the two things are necessary to have a good politician.
Yes.
I think it's interesting that where empathy has to be applied has changed. 20 years ago you had to show empathy for people who were on welfare, and you had to show empathy, for example, for refugees. Now, it's not so important to show empathy for those two groups of people. Now, very important to show empathy for the people who are just struggling to get by. And that's true in both Britain and in the United States.
That's Mrs May's theme too.
Mrs May's theme as well as Donald Trump's. There's been a real change of the target of the empathy.
I wanted to ask John this, because you've been to the States, I think.
I live
there. There you go. Would I be right in thinking that you're not honestly empathetic character if you've got a massive ego, and that would therefore rule Mr Trump out from being an empathetic person?
Well, I mean, what Trump, as Michael just said, what Trump shows is a kind of very selective, authoritarian form of empathy, where he is purporting to empathise with the forgotten white working class. But that empathy then works in his skewed worldview by then attacking and feeling and being very unempathetic towards Muslims and Mexicans.
So for him, it's a zero-sum game in a way.
Yeah, and that's, if you're going to be empathetic, be empathetic. What's been bugging me the last few years, particularly with the rise of social media, is that everybody's in their corners and they're empathising with a small number of... and there's always collateral damage, there's always people...
You see that more in America, though, don't you, as well? Because the TV networks, they're kind of divided up.
I think so, but I think Britain is where... I think the British media's sort of fetish for... accusatory, sort of performance controversy, adversarial journalism, I think it's worse in Britain than it is in the United States.
Well, that's enough about me. Let's talk about you. You live in America, but what are you doing back here?
I'm here because I wrote a book a few years ago called The Psychopath Test,
yes.
And I'm doing a psychopath night.
Who's coming along?
Well, I've got some...
We could suggest some people if you...
I've got some amazing
Would you like...
guests.
These two probably fit in with that, would they not?
Listen, you can't get me to start diagnosing people from afar. It is psychopathic to
I assume
diagnose.
that psychopaths are not empathetic.
No, psychopathy is like the opposite of empathy. A lack of empathy is one of the items on the checklist. There's a checklist of 20 traits.
We'll do the test with you afterwards, Andrew.
Very well. I've never been able to say this before, but I'd like to wish you good luck with your psychopaths night.
Yeah.
John, thank you.
Thank you.